Do you know that our Federation recently participated in a Crop Protection Symposium? To enlighten us on the intention of the symposium and so much more, we are proud to welcome Mr. Ian Chapman, representing the St. Kitts Department of Agriculture, and Kennedy Paul, who is joining us from Trinidad and Tobago. He is the Technical Sales Agronomist of Caribbean Chemicals and Agencies Limited. Welcome to you both.
Welcome, gentlemen.
All right, so to begin,
thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. To begin this conversation, Mr. Paul, we're going to direct this first question to you. Tell us about what sparked the launch of the Crop Protection Symposium.
Well, first of all, let me thank the Department of Agriculture for allowing and facilitating this particular symposium. But the need for a crop protection symposium is very important, especially in the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis by extension. Okay, because what tends to happen over time, if farmers are not using the proper cultural practices, the proper pesticides, whether it be insecticides, fungicides, or herbicides, etc., if they're not using it for the correct purpose, what we tend to recognize that as is indiscriminate use. And indiscriminate use of pesticides could lead to problems in the long run, like pesticide resistance buildup, etc. And when you have such phenomena happening, what you have is a drop in production by the farmers, whatever crop they grow in, etc. Because pest in agriculture is one of the major what we like to call sinks or losses, right? It does a lot of economic losses. So that the symposium that we had last week was really geared towards assisting the farmers with identifying and basically suggesting the best practices suited to managing certain insect pests in St. Kitts and Nevis.
So, Mr. Kennedy, has a symposium of this nature been held in St. Kitts before?
Not to that extent. Okay. Not to that extent. We've had trainings throughout the years, but in this particular instance, I want to say I was impressed with the turnout. I was impressed with the organization from the Department of Agriculture, both in St. Kitts and Nevis. Right? Well, basically we brought it a step further because the information was a lot more technical. We didn't just recommend. Basically, we didn't just recommend or we didn't just suggest ways to control the pests. We went in depth in terms of their cycle and what we like to call biology of the insect, where we learn the places where they tend to rest. We call it the resting stages. And if you know the resting stages in insect life cycle, it becomes a lot easier to control. And in the long run, you use less pesticide, which equate for safer consumption to you, the consumers who basically benefit from the fresh produce in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Great stuff.
All right, so Mr. Chapman, turning now to you, we want to know what some of the takeaways were for the Federation having participated in this symposium.
Well, as Mr. Paul indicated, this was timely for us because, as you can see, we're just finished the first month of the year, and so in order for we allow our farmers and our crop extension officers to have that knowledge, so that in order for them for the extension officers, for them to educate the farmers accordingly, so that they can better be able to feed the country. And as Mr. Paul rightfully indicated, when they have this knowledge, both extension and farmers, they can better able to produce greater yields, so that ultimately now we are trying to meet our mandates and targets to help to reduce that food importation bill. So this symposium in crop protection was timely. As you know, crop protection deals with all aspects of various aspects of disease management, pest management, weed management. So not just about pesticides, they even learn some cultural practices and integrated pest management that was best geared was sometimes, because it's not all about using chemicals. And that was one of the things that I was happy that Mr. Paul was able to educate both the farmers and the officers the best cultural practices to use first before using any form of chemicals.
All right, so when you mentioned that, and same to you, Mr. Paul, you did mention cultural practices, and I was a little, well, curious to say, to find out more about what some of those practices are. So very quickly, could you enlighten us as to what you said to the participants?
Can I?
Okay.
Well, some of the cultural practices are more like, okay.
Yeah, he's actually here. He's answering.
Yeah. Okay. So when we mention cultural practices refer to basically when you use methods besides the application of pesticides, whether it be biological or otherwise, right? Biological or synthetic. So with cultural practices, what we generally refer to is basically field sanitation, right? We refer to basic practices that farmers should use to reduce pesticide usage, like ground cover. We make a reference to the type of variety which the farmers chooses to plant, because a lot of times our farmers are poorly informed in terms of their variety. And one of the things I constantly keep reminding them, and I constantly keep reinforcing in their mind, is no amount of pesticide usage could substitute for poor cultural practices. And I make reference to the human anatomy, and I make reference to the fact that no matter how much medication you take, if you eat poorly, you will get sick. You understand? And the same thing relates to the plant and the way you do agriculture, the way you manage your crops. It doesn't matter how much pesticide you might use, how much insecticides you spray on the leaves, etc. If you don't control the weeds, the process is going to continue getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So basically what we do, we focus on an integrated approach to managing this insect pest, where we incorporate the cultural practices, which we refer to as certain management practices, your weed control, the type of varieties you decide to plant, the way you decide to irrigate, depending on the type of insect you might have, and basically the type of, the season, we have a wet and dry in the Caribbean, the type of season we're in has implications to the way you control your pests. So we just basically try to encompass all of the facets of crop management into one seminar. And it was good.
Mr. Paul, I once had a lime tree when I lived in Antigua, and it was full of pests. And I don't know if this could be incorporated as a cultural practice. I would mix a big bucket of soap powder and water and throw it on the trees, and my tree had no problem. The pests washed off and my limes just grew like crazy. Would you recommend something like that?
No. All right.
Just
that is, no. That is a practice we constantly do in terms of mixing soap water and spraying on the plant leaf to control the insect pests. Though that might be effective in controlling the insect pests, right? What that does essentially, it washes off the waxy cuticle, right? Which is above the epidermal layer of the leaf. Long and short, you see the nice gloss on the leaf, on the lime tree? You wash that out over time. And what you leave your plants exposed to is microbial diseases, right? So you might see little spots appearing. Long and short, you take off the leaves first line of defense. So if the sun is too hot, the leaves, you would begin to see the leaves scorching, etc. So though I'm not opposed to using these home remedies, it's better if you grate some garlic and you grate some garlic and you squeeze out the water, etc. Or you blend some garlic in a little bit of water and you further dilute it before you spray it on. Or even the natural oils like neem oils, etc. I prefer you do that instead of using a detergent.
Okay.
But I've heard about that method already. Yeah.
Okay.
So following up on what Hortensia just asked both of you, this question concerns misconceptions that might have manifested in your interactions during the symposium. Were there some common misconceptions that you found coming to the floor that you had to address?
Yes, I definitely had to address it. And I wouldn't say it's basically misconceptions, it's just persons being poorly informed, and it just leading to long and short, what was happening is that the farmers were under the perception that the pesticides are getting weaker, and they are 100% correct. Okay? But the misconception they were having is that the manufacturers and the suppliers, which would include my company as well as others, are watering down the pesticides, which I found very funny. What is happening? I've been in this job for approximately, I want to say 8 years. And since I've been in this job, the pesticide groups, etc., that are being utilized in St. Kitts and Nevis hasn't changed. And I always make reference to the human anatomy. Like, for us humans, if we're using antibiotics, the same type of antibiotics over time, what you find, it becomes less and less effective.
Yep.
So the same thing relates to the insect pests. When you're using the same insecticide, the same fungicide, the same herbicides, and you don't introduce any new chemistry, what you have is pesticide resistance buildup. And what that leads to is the ineffectivity of the pesticides which you spray onto the plants. And basically, it has long-term effects not only on us, the consumers, but the farmers' economics, the farmers' ability to basically break even from his heels, because he has to use so much more insecticide or so much more pesticide. It is cutting into his bottom line, which is the profit. And that is what a lot of the farmers or commercial farmers are into agriculture for. It has to be profitable. But if you're using too much insecticides, because the insecticides that are available or the chemistry on the market that is available, well, long and short, it isn't changing much. Over time, the insects will get accustomed to the insecticides you spray. So Mr. Chapman, as well as the permanent secretary and the Department of Agriculture, the members of the Department of Agriculture has identified that has been one of the problems, and we are working on getting some new chemistries where pesticides are concerned. And not only newer chemistries, organic chemistries where pesticides are concerned in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we have a few organic lines we are preparing to test, etc. And hopefully the Department of Agriculture could approve the registrations of those organic pesticides.
So, turning to you, Mr. Chapman, in terms of that process of approval, what can you tell us, if anything at all?
Well, it's a process that goes to the Pesticide and Toxic Board, which is housed within the Department of Agriculture. It's a board consists of different members from across different fields of chemistry in the federation, and of course, so it's a diligent process. They would have to review the toxicity of the chemical, the environmental impacts that each of these products would make before any product can be registered or enter into the country for use. So it's basically, they're kind of what you would say almost like the shield and protectors of our humans, but not humans, but our citizens, so that make sure that the products that anybody, even across the board, not just, they don't even just, even some of them other insecticides such as BOP and those roach killers and rodent killers, things that make sure that it's, when they come into contact with human, they are not that deadly and harmful for us to, things. So they try really as much as possible to protect the citizens of the Federation from toxic and harmful chemicals.
So in that way, we can be sure that once there's approval, then not only will we see a higher yield, but there won't be any detrimental side effects.
Right. And so all in all, and not just side effects on humans, also any effects on the environment, other organisms such as birds and different things, because sometimes, hey, if these stuff get into the ground, the water table, that could have effects on animals, birds, and just messing with the whole biodiversity. Okay. So they really play a big role in this process.
So do we have a big bug problem here in St. Kitts?
No, we don't. Compared to most of the other countries in the region, we don't have a wide pest problem. Okay. Thank God that we do. We don't, sorry. But more in general, we do have some common pests that is spread throughout the region, but when compared to some of the sister islands in the region, we don't have such a wide thing because just drawing a reference, in Antigua they have the giant African snail, which that eats leaves, just wipe out a whole industry in Antigua and Barbados, and we thank God we are blessed within the Federation not to have such a disease. And it could go on and on, that different diseases and pests that within the region that is not here in St. Kitts Nevis. So I must now put a plug in for my quarantine unit as they continue to ensure and to protect our borders. And this is when persons now are asked to, before they import anything, they come and visit our plant quarantine unit so that they could get the right guidance as to ensure that we continue to protect our biodiversity and our environment.
Yeah, I know that you guys are like the watchdogs.
Well, we're like the customs department, the border control personnel, because we really and truly we have to protect our farmers. And basically, there's pests out there that that can totally wipe out our farmers' livelihood, and ultimately, then we continue to have to import all the foods that we're eating, and then with the safety of the products, as Mr. Paul would have mentioned earlier, we can't really afford to what persons are using out there and their chemistry of their products, but we can guarantee you on the chemistry and of what we are using here in St. Kitts Nevis.
All right, so that's definitely good to know. Mr. Paul, anything to add?
I just wanna once again compliment the Department of Agriculture in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to say they are amongst the most organized in terms of the product registration process, their training for their farmers, the technical training for their staff. They always place emphasis on that. Even during COVID, Mr. Chapman and the good folks over at the Department of Agriculture had me doing training with the technical staff because they want to ensure that the technical staff are properly equipped to advise the farmers or to act as crop advisors, competent crop advisors to the farmers. And in truth, they are amongst one of the best in the region. So I just want to encourage them. I wanna let them know they're doing a very good job. I hope that we could work together continue, I should say. I hope that we could continue to work together to ensure that the farmers of St. Kitts and Nevis are properly served.